Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
So where are we talking to you? Is this your home office?
This is my home office. It used to be the guest bedroom, but with coronavirus and everybody working and schooling at home, I've been exiled into this room so that I'm farther away because I'm too loud for everybody.
I understand. So I want to get onto the games in a bit, but before we do that, I'm interested in talking about the business and how it started. I've got a slight guess based on who works there, but tell me about the name. Where did that come from?
Well, so in 2009, I think it was, I moved to Southern California with my wife and daughter, and my brother, who's 8 years my junior, had been living here for a while, and it ended up being the first time that we were back in the same city since before I went to college. And we started gaming again, and like a lot of gamers, we started critiquing games and house ruling games, and eventually realized, man, if we're gonna complain about all these games, we should sort of put our money where our mouth is and try to make one of these things. So we did a bet to see who could design the first workable prototype of a game. I won the bet. Actually, I designed a memory game, and Johnny took some work that he had done previously on a different game and morphed that into Boss Monster. Boss Monster was our first release. It went on Kickstarter in 2012. It took us about 3 years of designing to make that happen. It did really well on Kickstarter. At the time, it was one of the top 10 game Kickstarters. I think we lost that ranking within like 3 days. I mean, Kickstarter was just going crazy at that time, and within no time there was the multi-million-dollar Kickstarters happening. So did well on Kickstarter and then did well in retail. And Boss Monster and its follow-ups in Unearth, which I see you have behind you, did well enough that about 3 years ago, I was able to go full-time on the company. Almost 4 years ago at this point. And Johnny was able to go full-time about a year ago. And so we're a small company. We're a boutique. We're really just about 3 employees. And we see ourselves as producing a small number of games a year that we just pour a lot of love into. So we're not particularly aspiring to be a bigger studio. We really like the idea of focusing on a few releases every year. And so far we've done pretty well with that.
Where do you find the inspiration for new games? Do you like to work with different designers? Is it yourself and your brother? What's the background in how you find the new games to bring out?
It's a really varied answer. So we have some games that we developed, like Boss Monster and Call to Adventure. We have some games that come from external designers, like Unearth and Night of the Ninja, which is an upcoming game I see you have behind you. And the answer is always a little different. With Unearth, we get a lot of game submissions from designers, and we generally say no to those because we have a very specific type of game in mind for Brotherwise. But Jason and Matt, who designed that, we just really enjoyed it. It's a very simple game. It's a great gateway game. It's a game where a new player can beat an experienced player. But when they brought that to us, it was a bees collecting pollen game from flowers. And there had been a couple games that came out with that theme. So we rethemed it to sort of this otherworldly delvers and these cute little guys. And we went with a different art style. But it's always a different sort of thing. But I will say we're attracted to games with an emotional hook. Mm-hmm. We're attracted to games that are as much an experience as they are a game. And so with Call to Adventure, we were really intrigued with sort of character-driven fantasy fiction, and we wanted to put people into that world of fantasy literature that we were so fond of. With Boss Monster, we really became enamored of this sort of nostalgic hook, the 8-bit art, the sort of side-scrolling gameplay. With Night of the Ninja, we just really loved the pace and excitement of the game, and that'll be coming out next year. But when people play it, they'll see that it's a game that really ties into that sense of survival. Trying to you're really trying to survive a Night of the Ninja, and it's great there. So I don't know that I have a good sort of is there a Brotherwise sort of mission statement of the type of game we're trying to produce? There isn't necessarily, but we really like games that are transformative, experiential, generally lighter to mid-weight. Our motto as a company is games that bring everyone to the table, and we really do try to make games that appeal to both gamers and non-gamers and less traditional gamers. The gamer girlfriends, gamer boyfriends, we sort of talk about them as folks who know gamers but don't necessarily get to the table a lot. We want everyone to find something to like in our games.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. Having played all of your games, I would agree with everything you said. The other thing I find that links them all together is the art. I mean, every single game that I've played of yours has got exceptional art for very different reasons. And I want to start with Night of the Ninja. As you said, that game's out next March, but we've been playing that, and for me, it's the best game of its ilk. I've been blown away by its simplicity and smooth mechanic. I love the fact that you don't have to have somebody act as the game's master. Everyone's involved. There's no apps. There's no mucking around like there are with other games like that, the social deduction games. But the art in it is absolutely beautiful, and so much so in the box, in the rules, you there's a page dedicated to that. And I love the fact that you've taken the time to do that, to just say, hang on a minute, just pause and take a look at this, because it's stunning. Where did you find the artist? Because this is a first time guy, right? I can't find anything about this person who's done this. He's new, right?
Yeah, so he's new to games, but he's not new to art. So Night of the Ninja is a social deduction game where you are a member of one of two houses of ninjas, and you're trying to eliminate the members of the other house before they eliminate yours. It's a little different from other social deduction games in the sense that you win each round as a team, but you win the game as an individual. And so you're collecting honor points as you go along. And Justin Gary designed it. He's the designer of very famous games like Ascension, Shards of Infinity, and frankly, one of our favorite designers. Justin has phenomenal mechanical sense. His understanding of game mechanics is almost unmatched, we think. So he brought Night of the Ninja to us, and he actually said, I've got this great game. I've got some lovely art for it, but I'm curious what Brotherwise would do with this game. And so we played it. We loved it. It's a fantastic social deduction game. It's much more structured than other social deduction games. So you get roll cards, which you can play at certain times in the game. Some of them give you information about the other players. Some of them assassinate the other players. Some of them disrupt the game in various ways. And we loved it. And the art he had was really quite beautiful. But as a Brotherwise game, we really wanted to find something unique. So we started to talk about what would make this game unique. And we came up with this idea of shadow box art. So what people may not realize when they look at the Ninja card art is that every card in it is a shadow box that's been constructed of multiple layers of paper, backlit, and then photographed by an artist named Ben Charman. He's in England, and he's actually a very well-known papercraft artist. So he did both the shadow box art for the Ninja cards there, and he did the paper cut art for the house cards, which is a less three-dimensional look, more sort of layered look. And I agree. He nailed it, and he nailed it so well that we ended up featuring a whole page for him in the rule book, because the process he goes through for each of these cards is just extraordinary. And some of the shadow boxes are, they're really thick in terms of how many layers are in there to get the right depth look to it and the right glow through. So that is something I feel like we're pretty good at. We're pretty good at figuring out what is the right look for a game. And again, it all comes back to that sense of, we're not just making a game, we're trying to make an experience that transports you in a different way. And we love it when people get so distracted by the art that they misplay the game. That's that's a great goal for us. Some designers and publishers are less into that. They're looking for art which, more seamlessly moves you through the game. And that's a perfectly valid philosophy and one which I appreciate. But we really want that sort of feast of the senses when you're playing one of our games. And I love to hear, when people are struck by the art. Ben absolutely made the look of that game.
Yeah, it's stunning. Where are those boxes now? Does he have them in his studio? Where
So, great question. He has them all. He can deconstruct the layers, right, and flatten them down for storage. But we've thought about doing things like at a convention, doing giveaways of the actual shadow boxes,
Wow, yeah.
which would be, they'd just be absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
So he's so good at what he does, and he really dove into this process. He ended up spending a lot more time on this game than I think he initially meant to, and it shows. The love and care for each card is it's there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, if ever those things become available, let me know, because I'll be first in the queue to get a hold of them. So this game's out next March. Is this going to be straight to retail, available on your website, or will this be Kickstarter?
It is. We try not to Kickstarter too much. We'll generally do one Kickstarter a year at most. And this year, the big Kickstarter was Overboss, which is in the Boss Monster family, although it's a very different game than the traditional Boss Monster games. But Night of the Ninja will be straight to retail, and I expect it to do very well. I mean, it is sometimes you're just not quite sure how a game will do as a publisher, particularly in this environment. But Night of the Ninja is just so much fun, and if we can just get out of lockdown and get party gaming going again, I'm really excited to see it take off. That's actually the reason we delayed it from a launch this year to March.
Right, I see. Yeah, I mean, obviously on the box it says 4 to 11. You need it to be back to when people can play together. But another thing I love about this game, there's a lot of things I love about this game. As I said, I think it's the best social deduction game I've ever played, is that it works in a 2. I played it in a 2 and really enjoyed it. It's a really good 2-player social deduction game. And I didn't think I'd ever say that. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So it's the 2-player version is less a social deduction game and more a sort of hidden information game, which is, similar. But yeah, we just cracked up when Justin brought us the 2-player version because we thought you couldn't do it. Now the game does not play 3-player. Interestingly enough, you can play 2 or you can play 4 to 11, but 3 breaks the central mechanic. But really, this game is. We got to play some 9 to 11 player games at Gamma last year, sort of before the convention season shut down due to COVID. And it was fantastic watching 11 people duke it out in this way. If you have an odd number of players, one person plays the Ronin who has no house and they're just trying to survive and disrupt everyone else. It's delightful. So yeah, your viewers will love this one. It is in many ways, I think as good as a game like Coup, and as easy to play as Werewolf. So.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think better than both. I absolutely love it. So going back to Overboss, I think it's an interesting story with Overboss. Okay, now let's try and be the bad guys, right? I guess that's the mechanic that you've gone with there.
In Overboss, it is a tile laying game where you're trying to build an overworld map, very much like a top-down retro video gaming map. Same art feel, same sort of retro nostalgic feel. But in this one, each type of terrain you put down, whether it's a dark forest or whether it's a swamp or whether it's a caves, dragon's caves, each of them is scored in a different way. So it's super accessible. It's quite light for intro players to get into. And at the end of the game, you more or less total up the score of all your terrain. Best described as sort of, a little bit of Sushi Go in terms of the set collection and the different ways of scoring. A little bit of King Domino in the sort of putting together arrangements of tiles. It is a wonderful, easy, and again visually gorgeous game where we just really put a lot of effort. Our pixel artist went went all out on this one, and I think it really shows. And that one is actually shipping to Kickstarter backers as early as December, but probably the first couple weeks in January, and then we'll be in stores. I think the third week of January.
Great. I mean, it looks like such a fun game. Again, it's going to be a continuing theme in our talk today. I love the art of it. It just takes you straight back to those sort of late 80s, early 90s games, and just the board itself. It just reminds me straight of the map in Super Mario on Nintendo. That's exactly where it takes you, and I absolutely love it. I think it's wonderful. So on the art, I want to talk about Call to Adventure now, and talking about art. My goodness me, that box is a box of art with a game in there too. That's how I would describe it. In every experience I've had playing this game and teaching other people this game, I've pretty much played this mainly in 2-player, although I really enjoy the solo too. I always say to them, don't rush in this game. Stop, pause, pick up the card, look at the card, breathe in the card, because every single thing is just absolutely beautiful. And it just strikes me that this game and the people who have put so much time into every single one of those cards is just so much more than just a board game. It's more than a story. It's more than the board game. It literally is a work of art, and it blows me away how much time it takes me to play each one, because I'm just pouring through it. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. I mean, you must have played it more than most people in the world, right? When you play that game, are you still lost in it? I don't see how I'm ever going to get tired of the artistry in these cards.
Yeah, so it's interesting because there's two types of Call to Adventure players. There's the min-maxers who are trying to maximize the points and who are very focused on putting together the best sort of engine. In many ways, for folks who don't know it, Call to Adventure is a little like Splendor with adventure. It's like you sort of build this engine, and instead of gym colors, you're building abilities. And, over time, your hero is getting more and more powerful. But the other type of players are the storytellers who could care less what their score is. They just want to have the coolest story as they go through the game. The game was inspired by fantasy fiction, as I said, and very inspired by, obviously, Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces, the sort of, the actual hero's journey as you go through there. And yeah, the art on that was amazing. So my brother is our art director, and I would guesstimate that on each art brief that he put together for each of those cards, and there's something like 160 cards in the game, he probably spent about an hour to 2 hours just putting together the brief, using visual examples from various, fantasy sources, using colors and trying to pull that out. And the artist just nailed it. We were going for a sort of concept arty feel. We wanted the art to be evocative, but not so prescriptive that you couldn't layer your own story on top of it. So you'll notice a lot of cards have a very concept art feel, sort of almost a fuzzy, indistinguishable look to them. And your brain just fills in your story on top of it in a way that really works. So yes, I'm so proud of that game, and so proud of the art, especially. We hear from a lot of players that they use it as a pre-D&D game. They'll sort of build the backstory of their character with that. And we've also heard from a number of English teachers, high school and college English teachers, who use it as an example of story plotting and sort of like very simple. You got an Act 1, an Act 2, and Act 3. They teach kids sort of simple story structure and let them make these characters and then write a story about it in a way that's really fun. it's a horribly unfair question, but do you have a favorite piece of art in that game? I do. Well, there's a couple. There's the Dark Colossus, which is this. It's for some reason it was immediately one of my favorite pieces. I think because I'm very fascinated by giants and by colossi in general. And it's sort of this electricity crackling storm colossus in a way that I think is just gorgeous. But there's just, there's so many amazing examples of art in there. I think Divine Calling, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's a flipped card. There's sort of a kind deity looking thing on the top and an evil deity looking thing on the bottom if you flip the card over. But I also like the little things just as much. So we really went all out on sort of representation in the game. We wanted heroes of all shapes, sizes, genders, and colors in the game. And I think that shows through. And there's a lot of personal moments in each card as well. So there's allies cards that show like what your little brother and you are doing, playing as kids and how that formed you as a hero. And that ally can be lost. You can lose your little brother or sacrifice them to get something else. And so yeah, all kinds of beautiful art in that. Also, 2 expansions. One is the Name of the Wind expansion, set in the world of Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind series. That's a full shuffle-in expansion. And then there's a full standalone expansion set in the world of Roshar, which is Brandon Sanderson's The Stormlight Archive. And the art in both of those is, again, whether you're into those books or not, if you're a fantasy art fan, I highly recommend picking up those games because it's just, again, a huge world of art out there.
Whenever I finish the game, I'm sure a lot of people are the same. I just love telling the story of what my character did, what they overcome, how they ended up finishing their story, and it almost becomes who can tell the best story rather than the points. So going back to what you said earlier, I'm absolutely that guy. I mean, I'm chasing the points as well. I'm trying to do as well as I can mechanically in the game as well. But for me, it's more about who can create the best story. And I absolutely love what you brought with that. I think it's absolutely stunning. The theme is just so rich and dripping throughout. It's quite unique, I think, for me in terms of how much I'm just instantly absorbed into that game. Theme's so important to me for games anyway, but this thing just is effortlessly bringing me in throughout the whole thing. The card that stands out the most to me is when you fight the dragon in Act 3, and it's the little flip of the tail in the foreground.
Yeah, the foregrounded tail.
That really gets me because it sets me there. That little thing there, and it's just a shadow because you can't see much of the dragon because it's in the dark, and that little foreground bit just it puts me there. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Talking about theme, I'm keen to talk about Unearth now as well because I find the theme in Unearth absolutely fascinating. It's interesting you mentioned earlier that you actually developed the theme a little bit from what was originally presented to you, because what we have now with Unearth is such an interesting theme. It's quite light and quite dark. But you've essentially got this devastated Earth, but then you've got these cute little things kind of running around trying to make it all good again. But there's not a ton of story about why it's become devastated and how we've got there. And the whole thing I find utterly fascinating. How did that come about from what was the original theme in that game?
It's a fun story. So Jason and Matt pitched the game to us, and they had pitched a game the previous year that we had not gone for. And so we were a little hesitant about what would become Unearth. But we played it, and then we went back to the hotel room. It was at Gen Con, maybe 2016, I can't remember. And we started talking and said, the bees is tough to do. There's Hive that just came out, and there's any number of bee games. What could we do? And we started asking that question, what would be a cool emotion for this? It's one of the questions we ask ourselves that I think more publishers and designers should ask themselves. What's the emotion that people have? And I said, well, what if the emotion was melancholy? Or Johnny said that. One of us said, what if the emotion was melancholy? And we're like, you can't do melancholy. A game's supposed to be fun. And we started talking. It's like, the game could be fun, but the emotion could be sort of this sad sense of what was lost. And the theme very quickly fell on top of that. And we talked with Matt and Jason about it. They came back with sort of some embellishments on that. What if there's these little guys, these little delvers, and they were trying to uncover and find their lost civilization and find these lost runes. And so very quickly, it all came together really after just asking that first question of, what's the emotional experience supposed to be like? And so we made a decision very early on to provide very little backstory for this. The only backstory you get is in the front of the game that essentially ends with the phrase, then all was lost. And that All Was Lost was sort of where the art came out of, the emotional hook. Jesse Riggle, who was a really big artist in the voxel art community, so we were very, very excited about what he brought to this. And I just love it. I think that Unearth is sort of this fun, easy, very lightweight game, but it also is a emotionally heavy feel to it. So it feels a little heavier than it really is. And I think that's kind of a magical combination in a game when you're playing something that's easy and light and fun to play and easy to learn. But then you leave it feeling like, ooh, man, that was a little heavy.
Yeah.
That's the sweet spot for me.
Yeah, definitely. When I played that game with my wife, that was almost exactly what she said. The game looks lighter than it is, and by the end of it, you realise there's a lot of big strategic decisions you have to make, especially in the 2-player that I did with her, when there's only so many cards that you could possibly get, and so every single decision you make is absolutely crucial. And you realise that in sort of game 2, game 3, that you can't have any filler turns. You've got to be making sure everything really works hard. So yeah, I'd concur entirely with that. Back to the theme and the story. Do you have a backstory to this game in your head? Like, do you?
Yes, we do. And actually, we embellish on that backstory a little bit in the expansion, which is called The Lost Tribe. And the Lost Tribe expansion is a 3-in-1 expansion that adds in a 5th player, so a lost tribe that the other tribes find. It adds in a lot more cards and Delver cards. Do you know how you can only play Delver cards on your turn, which are sort of these cards which can modify the dice that are on the board or as you're rolling them? So it introduced these special Delver cards that you can play whenever anyone rolls a 4. So a 4 being the least immediately applicable roll in the game, because high rolls win you these runes that you claim, low rolls win you stones that you build wonders, game modifying wonders out of. So we like that. But then it also added in a solitaire campaign. So the solitaire campaign actually tells the story of the darkness. So the darkness is the plague or the event or the thing that came and overwhelmed their world. And the lost tribe has retained the knowledge of the darkness and is back to help the other tribe. The darkness is back, and the lost tribe comes back with it to try to help the other tribes to fight off the darkness. So I think we've still kept a lot of it very ambiguous. We really like the idea of the story being lost to history as much as the civilization was. But you do get a little bit more out of it in the expansion.
I have to check that out then, because it's absolutely intrigued and fascinated me that the absence of the story is what makes it almost so intriguing to me. But the game itself I find really interesting. There's a real mix of mechanics there, the tile placement with the set collection and the dice rolling. There's a lot going on there, but it all feels so intrinsically linked into a really smooth mechanic, which is literally play a card if you want to, roll and place a dice, and that's it. But there's so much stuff going on with all of this. And when I have explained this game to people, they always say to me, well, and what else you do? What haven't you told me? No, you've learned the whole game. Let's start playing. And they think initially, like I said earlier, you're going to be entering this quite light game, which I guess turn-wise it is, but strategic thinking it absolutely isn't. And I think that's the balance that you've created that is, for me, why it's just such a solid, good game.
Yeah, we tend to build games with a fairly heavy luck quotient. We really like the idea of new players being able to compete with experienced players. That's one of our design philosophies, I would say. Having said that, Jason and Matt came up with this sort of delightful mechanic in this game that we ended up calling Bend Your Luck. So the Delver cards, even though you're rolling a die and essentially the die result is going to determine your success or lack of success, ultimately, you're able to bend it with these Delver cards. So whenever you lose a rune that you thought you might have been getting, you get a Delver card, and you're able to play that to raise or lower someone's die or re-roll your die. So the game has a high luck quotient, probably not the game for a super strategic, non-luck oriented gamer. But even then, it's a great appetizer game for that type of player, because there is a fair bit of strategy once you start to get a grasp of the odds. So the game really relies on your understanding of your odds of success or failure for the more strategic players. For the lighter, funner players, the decision making is relatively, I want to say, a little bit reactionary. You know, you're sort of going to go with the dice that you get and make the most of that situation. But there are, any number of very fun games like that, and I think Unearth does a really good job with that approach.
I agree. I like the way it also forces you to enter some kind of like conflict as well with some of the ruins cards that have the higher numbers. You're not going to be able to win those with your own dice alone, unless you just roll
right
4, 6, 6, 6, 8. You're not going to do it. So you have to be competing with other people. You need their dice in there to reach that accumulative total. And quite a few times I played this game with other people. They just go after their cards. You do your cards, I'll do mine. We'll be quite separate. I'm collecting green, you collecting orange, or whatever it may be. But then you realize with these bigger numbers, you have to cross over because you need their dice. But the game works so well in that, well, if you lose that card because someone else has rolled the highest on it, all your dice come back to you and you get the Delver card.
Yeah.
There can't be bad rolls because 1, 2, 3 get you a stone anyway. It's really nice that no roll is ever really bad. Although that's how I said it when I played with my wife the other day, and then I think I needed just one to complete a particular ruin. There was still a stone on it, so I had my D4 available. So I thought, well, I'll roll that. So I'll definitely at least get the one, obviously, and then get a stone because it's
2 4s in a row, I'm guessing.
Exactly, 35% likely, But there's a lot of fun with that game. I really enjoy it. So just before we finish up, obviously we've got Night of the Ninja coming up next March. You've got Overboss reaching Kickstarter backers in end of this year, start next year, and then hitting retail. Obviously, like any publisher, I'm assuming you're not resting at that. What does 2021 look like for you guys?
So we've got another Boss Monster mini expansion called Vault of Villains. That's coming out in January. That one's really aimed at sort of the Boss Monster completionist. It's we call it the expansion to bind them all. It's got all of the it takes all these disparate mechanics that have shown up in various Boss Monster expansions and combines them so that you can play those expansions together without as much mechanic dilution, which can sometimes happen with expansion heavy games. We've got 2 games based on a very popular animated show. We're not ready to announce that yet, but it will be soon. And that's there will be a smaller, sort of more mass market based, more tactical game, and then a bigger, more hobby based strategic game. And then we've got a couple other games that are slotted for release. One is called Gods Above. And that is probably going to be probably a late 2021 release would be my guess, probably just in time for the holiday season. And one that is a little bit of a departure for us in the sense that it is there's almost no luck in that game. It is a highly strategic, sort of almost abstract game in a way, but in a sort of with a Brotherwise twist. And I'll save that for future release of information. And then we've always got a couple games in development that we're not sure if they'll come out this year or the next, but not quite ready to chat about those.
Exciting. That sounds like a busy few months for you guys. I will watch with bated breath to see what comes out next. It's been an absolute delight talking with you, Chris, and playing your games. I'm a massive fan of what you do, and I really appreciate what you're bringing to the community. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was great to talk to you.